Okay, everyone, we're here. We're live. This is Dr. Politics and the Political Architect Show. I'm Ryan Nidick here with an extended panel this week. Dwight Patel, Jackie Saxton, Don Irvine, Mark Unkefer, Marcus Alzona, and Brian Griffiths, former editor-in-chief of Red Maryland and the new head of the Duck Pen. Welcome.
Great to be here.
All right, let's start this off. Ryan, welcome. It's good to see you.
Good to see
I
everybody.
think what's on our agenda here tonight is that want to talk a little bit about the duck pin and kind of the evolution of the duck pin, what the duck pin means. Apparently, Mark knows what the duck pin means. He's got a whole explanation of that. But let's talk about this whole thing. You had Red Maryland. We've now moved to the duck pin. Go. Give us a rundown here.
Well, a couple of months ago, Greg Klein and I decided that it was time to bring Red Maryland into port. We had kind of run our course. We kind of got so tired of Red Maryland was a very Maryland-focused show. Maryland politics has and remains my passion through my 20 years of activism. And so much of social media, so much of what people focus on right now is the national stuff. Which when you were talking about something like Red Maryland, something that's branded exclusively towards state and local politics, a lot of what we were talking about would just get lost in the sauce, and people would want to talk about national stuff. The other frustration we both had, admittedly, is the fact that nobody clicks the link anymore. And so we would put our articles on Facebook and people would literally want us to explain the article to them. And basically, we just resigned ourselves to saying, well, did you click the link? Well, no, you should tell me. No, click the link and everything will be explained to you. So I decided this would be a good opportunity to branch out and do the duck pin, which is a little more of a broader focus. We talk about things beyond Maryland state and local politics. We'll talk about national politics. We talk about entertainment. We talked a lot about baseball. And we would probably be talking a lot more about baseball if there were baseball.
Orioles undefeated this year so far. They have not lost a game.
Orioles are undefeated and are also in last place. Yeah. So, this is just kind of giving an opportunity to branch out. Mark has joined me, leaving Red Maryland and coming over to the duck pin, and we got some other folks here. Some names you know, some names you don't know. I've got a college football guy who actually is Justin Reedy, state senator from District 5. So we've got a more extensive, series and a more extensive focus. Writing for me is as much about the catharsis of the actual writing as it is the topic. So the fact that I've been able to branch out now and talk about stuff that I really didn't have an outlet before. Red Maryland, we were focused in on state and local politics. The same with my column in the Capitol in Annapolis. And, having the duck pin allows a greater focus and to just talk about things I want to talk about. There's no business plan. There's no model. It's not like I'm trying to take over the world with this. It's just it's an outlet for us to write about things that we're interested in.
All right. So one thing is that one of your writers, Jeff Quinton, is an old friend. I mean, he actually was an intern with Accuracy in Academia way back in the day. So I've known Jeff for a long, long time now. Mm-hmm. But where did you come up with a name? Why did you decide on the duck pin of all things?
So when we decided we were going to close Red Maryland and I decided to open up something new, I spent a while trying to think of a name. And I wanted something that wasn't so locked in. When you're talking about Red Maryland, you're locked in. You're writing about Maryland politics and you're writing from obviously a conservative perspective, because obviously when it was started, Strife from Red State, who's now the editor-in-chief of Red State, he was our co-founder along with me, Greg, and Mark Nugent. So we were kind of locked into that focus. Because we were going to write something that was more general, I wanted something to call it something that was a little more different, a little more inquisitive, a little more curious to people. And I settled on the duck pin because of the duck pin bowling being a Maryland sport. Duck pin bowling is only done in very small areas of the country, predominantly in Maryland. If you believe the rumors, and there's actually no settled history on this, duck pin bowling was actually created in Baltimore by John McGraw, who later was the manager of the Orioles in the 1890s and then went on to be the manager of the New York Giants. So there's a Maryland connection there. You'll notice if you pay a very close attention, there's four colors in the duck pin logo, which are the four colors of the state flag, color matched to the exact Pantone colors and everything. So it's a way to keep the Maryland pride, the Maryland heritage in the name, tell people, this has a little bit of a regional, bent to it, at least coming from my perspective, but allowing us to open up and talk about more things. Ironically, we have not once talked about bowling yet, so I think we'll have to get to that at some point.
Hey, Mark, does that jibe with
that does jibe? So we did a show earlier this week with George Allen and Bob Ehrlich, and I don't know if it was on the air or beforehand, but we were talking about the transition beforehand. But we were talking with the former Governor Ehrlich about the transition from Red Maryland, and he had very gracious things to say about Red Maryland. But when we mentioned Duckpin, he immediately lit up and said, "That's such a Baltimore name." It's, and I'm like, "What? Explain." Listen, I grew up in Buffalo. I'm not one of those people who born and raised in Maryland, so I didn't have a clue as to where that came from. I just went with the flow.
Yeah, if I'd been from Buffalo, it might have been the Speedy or the Wing or the Red Hot or something like that.
I'm
here,
yeah.
man. I'm here.
So, Mark, I think what I'm getting from this is you should add a column about buffalo wings to your Duckpin contributions.
It's a food review column.
What are you going to write about, Mark?
I'm going to write about the same stuff I think there's a real opportunity. I mean, I get somewhat what Brian said is that there was a very clear format with Red Maryland. So you really understood sort of what the parameters were. There was always going to be a Maryland piece to it. It was always going to have a somewhat more conservative orientation to it. I don't think we ever had a conversation about it. It was just when I started writing, it was always, I understood exactly what the format is. I suspect now that it's Duckpin and maybe there's going to be a little bit more opportunity. That said, for me, I think there's always an opportunity to talk about things that are not getting covered in Maryland, and sometimes even dig a little deeper to issues that aren't getting covered enough, and that's what I'd like to aspire to.
And
and there's still a home for that too. I mean, that's something that I'm still going to do as well. I already covered one of the first week. I covered my anticipation that Sheila Dixon would run as a write-in candidate in the general election, even though she did eventually concede to Brandon Scott. But we'll see if she still actually believes that concession in a month. So there's still plenty of opportunities to write about that, but it does give everybody a kind of a wider field. So like Mark said, you're not necessarily, there's no expectation of constriction on the topics like there was when you're talking about when Maryland is right there in the name.
Right.
And Brian, huge kudos to you. This was a little before my time, but with Red Maryland, you were kind of ahead of the curve or on the curve with the blogging thing, and that became very big. And now the next big thing is the Medium and the Substack kind of shared blog site. So you're really staying where people are going to consume content next. So
yeah, the blogging thing, I started blogging kind of back at the tail end of 2005, which was kind of the middle of the first wave of bloggers becoming credible news sources and credible sources for opinion and commentary. And then Red Maryland started in 2007, and eventually I folded my personal site into Red Maryland and just kind of focused on Red Maryland. Where we were really ahead of the curve was doing podcasting. Greg did his first podcast actually all the way back in 2007. We started podcasting as Red Maryland in 2011. I mean, at one point we had 7 podcasts a week, and this was still years before you had things like Spotify and things like, some of the leading, Stitcher and some of the leading podcast distributors now. I mean, it took some Herculean effort to get on iTunes or to get on some of these podcatchers that are out there. I first did video vlogs, basically. I did that in 2007 as well. So I mean, it's a matter of being ahead of the curve, but it's also a matter of capitalizing on that curve. I actually was kind of inspired to use Substack primarily because I saw some other people who have made good use of it. But honestly, one of the best things about it was knowing that with Substack, you actually get to have the email list functionality and don't have to pay for it. That was the biggest cost that we had with Red Maryland, was the email list functionality, because we were using MailChimp, and that cost $65 a month. With Substack, we have the same functionality and are paying $0 a month for it. So it's a win-win situation as far as that concerned. Plus, it's a nice, easy tool to use. It's actually probably even a little easier than WordPress. I'll let Mark decide if he agrees with that or not. But It's a nice tool to use, and it does everything we need it to do, and it gets the information out there in a way that is easily readable for folks, and one that we can't really break too much.
Let me ask you, after all these years, what story got the most attention from Red Maryland?
There were a couple stories that got a lot of attention. I think the one that got the most attention was the state flag back in 2017. This was the last round of statue discussions, and this was the removal of the Taney statue in Annapolis and the removal of statues all around the country. Some chucklehead from Baltimore City, who wasn't even from Maryland, started making all sorts of noise about our state flag having Confederate symbols in it, which admittedly is somewhat true, because our state flag is a combination of the Calvert arms, which was used as the symbol of the Northern sympathizers, and the Crossland orange, which was a symbol of the Southern sympathizers. And that flag, and of course, those are the two founding families of the province of Maryland back in 1632. And the flag was first flown in 1888 at a 25th anniversary of Gettysburg reunion, and it was flown as a flag of reconciliation. There is no better symbol of reconciliation in the state of Maryland than there is our state flag, which everybody loves up and down, no matter
the war on the Maryland state flag is always pushed by people not from Maryland who are jealous of our flag because we got the best looking flag in the entire country.
Yeah, it's Maryland and then maybe New Mexico, but they're
Arizona,
way down here.
Arizona,
All right.
New Mexico is a crappy flag.
All right. Well, there's so many things that happened this week, and we have such a short time to talk about them. So why don't we get started?
All right. So let's just spend a few minutes here on where we are with the reopening, because we are making progress here. Maryland continues to move along on a state level. I saw DC just announced phase 2. Virginia, I guess, is close to phase 3. Montgomery County lagging a little behind, but I was delighted to find out this morning when I double checked that after 95 days at 5 p.m. today, the gym's opened, and I guess was it in room dining now? Did that start?
At 5 p.m. today.
Yeah,
5 p.m. today.
That's 2 hours and 12 minutes.
But
Yes.
Don, at what cost to the gym? Because I cannot imagine doing a cardio workout or any kind of intense workout with a mask on. I would probably pass out.
Well, this is what's funny about this, because I actually have a friend of mine who works for Gold's Gym here by my house. So when I posted this thing about the gym's opening, she, and I've said, I kind of quizzed about the whole face mask thing. She said, well, Gold's is only requiring that in the desk area, probably with their employees more than anything else, but not for the individual patrons working out. However, there was a big discussion on Facebook for the Planet Fitness in Germantown, who announced their opening, and they are apparently requiring face masks. And most patrons are just having a hyper fit because they're like, how are we supposed to wear a mask while we're doing cardio and all this stuff? You can't breathe. So this is kind of a crazy thing. But then again, Planet Fitness charges what, like $10 a month? So, I'm paying
For
a
that
lot
money,
more.
buy a treadmill.
Yeah, well, that's
Honestly,
but the economics of the gyms, 95 days of not being able to be open, we don't know how many of these gyms will actually open up and stay open for an extended period of time, right?
Don, my gym, Washington Sports Club, they kept billing me every month, even though they were closed. I still got billed.
That's a great business model.
Yeah,
Gold's
It's
did that
donation.
for about 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, and then they finally made an announcement that they were halting payments because of this, because no one at that point in time, I think they looked at it and said, oh, this is going to take longer than we thought. We don't want to anger the customers.
Right.
But the problem is that they still had overhead to deal with, right? This has been one of the biggest problems about all this shutdown, is just the immense pressure on the businesses in terms of their costs, their rent, their payroll, all of these things going on there.
And, as much as we've been tough on Montgomery County in the past few weeks, as you guys alluded to today, we're going into phase 2. They're really, catching up to where a lot of the country was. My parents called me. They're in Florida today. They're like, this is so great. We can eat outside in a restaurant. If we can't do that in Montgomery County, I was like, you could do that in Montgomery County for the past 2 weeks. And they didn't realize that. Apparently, they don't leave the house enough. But they're really like the states that people are saying, oh my gosh, even people in Montgomery County, the Bethesda elites that are saying all these inbrates in Florida that don't know what they're doing and they're going out. Montgomery County is pretty much in the same place as North Florida.
Well,
now,
see, I had the opposite experience with my mom, who just came back to New Jersey from Florida. It's just,
why would you do that?
This is
Yeah.
terrible. I can't go anywhere.
It's like going from West Berlin, to East Berlin. I don't know why would anybody want to do that.
A friend of mine, middle of the road guy, he noticed that even though the county is supposed to open up, the Montgomery County parks have said, we're not ready yet. We're going to get some more guidance. Like, what has the county executive done to prepare for this opening? If the old park system is not saying it can't open it up, it's like
How do you close a park? I mean, I walked through my neighborhood park 2 days ago. It's a Montgomery
They got the
County
orange
park.
construction fence.
I mean, the
around
park in my
Didn't they just
neighborhood
tear
seemed
it down,
completely
though?
open. So.
Well, I mean,
what was the park department doing?
It's mainly the playground areas,
Yeah.
though, right? I mean, this new park that we have down here, it's a couple years old. They've got a playground area, and that's got that orange, just that kind of flexible fencing thing. I think that Dwight you're alluding to.
Yeah.
That's wrapped around that. The rest of the area, there's kind of a path that goes around the area. You can walk on that. I mean, the fields there are only by reservation, so you can't get in there. They're all behind locked gates. But I think, in general, that's what they're looking at the playground area versus a lot of other things. But what about, is it a little bit of a hypocrisy? They won't open up everything like that. But here in our my backyard, tomorrow at 3:00, there's going to be a Black Lives Matter march, apparently starting in that Flower Hill area and then going up Mid-County Highway. People are going to be out there. I'm sure a lot of them will not be wearing masks. It is outdoors. If you're outdoors, I mean, how much danger is there?
Well, here's the thing. COVID-19 is a very smart virus, Don. It knows to hide. It knows that at 5:00 it's time for it to go because Mark Elrick's going to come and round it up. That's why you can't open at 8 a.m. like normal counties. We wait to 5 p.m. because it knows.
You're missing it, Dwight. It's a very woke virus.
There you go.
So if you're demonstrating for the right causes,
It doesn't get you.
It
Whereas,
doesn't get you.
At the
People are
reopen
completely
Montgomery rally, the transmission rate is double that of it is at the Black Lives Matter
By the way,
rally.
the COVID virus is all going to Oklahoma.
And this is just, I want you to understand,
Been
I'm
waiting in
not,
line for 2 days.
everything I just said is based on science,
Yes.
right? I mean, I'm not making stuff up. It's based on actual data that we have.
I think Fauci has said the same, but in the same day, one, that the riots are totally fine, the protests are totally fine, it's not going to spread anything, it's great. But also, COVID-19 is still a big problem. We all need to stay home.
No, I think it's kind of ridiculous at this point. And I think one of the big frustrations I've had as a college student is colleges taking tons of precautions and saying any class over 50 people is going to be online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're almost going to the extent of actively encouraging the protests that are going on, if not having gone to that extent. And it's like, we're willing to support breaking the rules for a righteous cause. Well, as an institution of education, shouldn't learning be a righteous cause? That's just something to think about. Apparently, the administrations at most of these universities,
all they care about is that your parents' check has been sent in.
I know.
And they got your money.
Yeah, well, obviously tuition's not going to go down because how could you do that? And you're going to pay fees for a gym you can't even use. But Mark, you had a point, I think, before.
I was going to say that the most dangerous opportunity for transmission is at a Trump rally in Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. So
this could be the most catastrophic event. This could be as though a plane loads of sick people from China had come in from Wuhan. This is the functional equivalent of what that is.
So Brian, now that the duck pin has more of a national focus, are you going to be doing some reporting from on the ground at the Trump rally?
Just trying to get me in trouble, aren't you? Trying to get me in trouble.
I'm just setting up a layout.
I would not be caught dead at a Trump rally under any circumstance. Let's make that very clear.
Here is the big thing. Okay, did you hear Joe Biden had a Zoom rally and Joe couldn't get onto the Zoom call himself?
That I believe.
He couldn't figure out the settings.
Well, he's in the basement.
Well, the problem was he couldn't unmute himself, and we all know how tough that is.
We've had that problem.
Let's have a debate. The first debate between the president and Joe Biden. We put them both in front of a computer and let them see whoever gets to Zoom first wins the debate. We'd be there for a very long time. But
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, today is a holiday, Don.
Right. It is Juneteenth. A holiday that here, I mean, for a lot of America, not really, people don't really pay a lot of attention to it. It's definitely big in Texas. There's certain states. Most of the states in the country actually recognize Juneteenth as a holiday. Not all. I think it's Hawaii, North Dakota, South Dakota.
I think it's the 2 Dakotas now. That's it, I think.
It shows up on my Google calendar, my
Yeah,
Apple calendar.
I've seen 2 sources that said it was 4 states, which was Hawaii, North, South Dakota, and Montana. And then I saw another one that said it was Hawaii, North Dakota, and South Dakota. So I don't know. It's somewhere in between there. So at least 2, maybe 4. We'll see about that. But this has become a big national rallying cry because of all the things that are going on here. I think there was a demonstration, I guess, in D.C. today. You know, I guess there weren't really any workers. There haven't really been much of the workers anyway in D.C. So they kind of took over D.C. with their Juneteenth rally. But one of the things that's coming out of this also is a movement to make this a national holiday. Is take this from the local level, a state level, and move it up to the national level. Is this something that is a good idea, a bad idea? I mean, where are we going with this? How much should we be talking about this?
I see no downside to making this a federal holiday. First of all, I won't say no to a paid day off. I don't think anyone here would say no to a paid day off.
And June has no federal holidays.
Right. And you know what? And
How much is this going to cost us with paying all the people?
Don, how can you put a price tag on this?
I think that this holiday is a
fiscal
good
guy.
thing. I honestly think this holiday is a good thing. It's not a holiday about, well, most Jewish holidays tend to be about something depressing, but it's a celebration. Let's be honest here. Every Jewish holiday is about someone trying to kill the Jews. But, oh my God.
Well, here's the question. Okay, now we want to make this a federal holiday. What's the next federal holiday?
Hold on.
We're making way too many federal holidays.
Let Brian go ahead.
Couple of things here. One, I would like to welcome the Democrats to the Juneteenth party. The first time I saw major Juneteenth celebrations, it was the Maryland Republican Party putting them on over 10 years ago. So I welcome Democrats to joining the stage here. Number 2, I think it's absolutely important we recognize the end of slavery. I mean, that was a big freaking deal. It's actually older than several of our federal holidays that are already in existence when you look at its origins.
Brian, are we gonna do this? Because I know what the left is going to do. They're going to say, "Oh, let's get rid of Columbus Day in October." And
let's be real. We also need to add the day after the Super Bowl as a federal holiday.
Right.
Okay, but let's be real here.
Let me try a little different. Let me just be a little bit more literal historically. I'm not sure Juneteenth is the right day. I think it's
December 18th, 1865. That was the day that the 13th Amendment went into place that freed the last remaining legal slaves in the United States, which were in Kentucky and Delaware, because the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free any of the slaves that were in the border states.
The danger of doing it on December 18th is people are just going to roll that shit. Straight through New Year's.
Don't worry, we don't.
Do we have a button for that? Is there a bleep for that somewhere?
It's okay.
Getting too comfortable.
But
I think it's funny y'all are worried about cussing and invited me on the show.
I think Brian's
They're
exactly
gonna go the
right.
18th to Christmas to the New Year's, and it's gonna be
This is
like
a long existing holiday. The Maryland Republicans and many people across the country, especially in Texas, have been celebrating it for years. It's not like we just made something up out of thin air. And Dwight, to address your point about Columbus Day, that's kind of neither here nor there.
No, but that's where the left will go. They will want to. I will support June.
I mean, that's a slippery slope fallacy, right? We can say that Juneteenth's an existing holiday, and if you want to recognize it as a federal holiday, I mean that's a conversation in and of itself.
Although getting
rid of Columbus Day is a separate conversation.
July 1st is the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation.
That too.
So make it July 1st.
Hey, a long weekend now.
But then it comes up against July 4th, right?
Well, yeah. So then you could have a 4-day weekend instead of.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think that there's nothing negative about this being a federally recognized holiday. It's a celebration of a positive thing that happened in our history. And I think that it's something that both sides, to an extent, can agree on.
A victory of a Republican president over Democrat slaveholders.
Yes.
Yeah, but to Dwight's point, I think I kind of understand where Dwight's going with this. Is that there will always be with these federal holidays. You always get some pushback about how many federal holidays can we cram on the calendar and all this, or do we trade one off for another? So potentially, Columbus Day would probably be a big target for a trade-off. Or if they do add it, Dwight, I could also see the left, the way they're going now anyway, is changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day.
Some states have already done that, haven't they?
Okay,
Yes, they
okay.
have.
I have a modest proposal: is that we rename Labor Day Right to Work Day.
Hey,
I like that.
Yeah, there we go. I think
like that.
That'll really go far in Maryland. I know.
Actually, here's the thing. Why should let's do this. Why don't we have a federal holiday one every month? That should be our quota. Every month you get one federal holiday at the
Can
very
we just pick one of
November,
the
we
ones
have
off
two.
the list and cycle through?
So-
Now they have like National
I think Dwight
Learn
just
on the
doesn't wanna go
Cob
to
Day
work.
or whatever.
So-
One of my
Just go through a
professors,
different one.
One of my
As we know-
professors in college, actually, he was an African-American professor, but in the political science department, came up with this idea. He's like, okay, I don't think King Day should be a federal holiday. I think everybody should be granted one holiday and call it Heroes Day. Take it off and like whoever you want. And it would be a floating holiday. So, that's, I've heard worse ideas. I've heard
But
better.
Brian, here's the thing. Every day the government employees are not at their jobs, it's a good day because they're not doing something to undermine
On
our
that
freedom.
Are there
note-
holidays? There are other holiday possibilities. There's Boxing Day. The
There's-
Brits do
Don't they
that.
have a Singles
Carol
Day in
Agnew's
China?
birthday, Richard Nixon's
No,
birthday.
no.
Okay, so there's
Wait,
a
wait,
lot.
I want to say one more thing
Queen's
though.
birthday.
Dwight, what costs us more, having the federal workers at work or having them at a day off?
Oh, definitely at work. Definitely at work.
Okay, so what else can we talk
All
about?
right. So in conjunction with that, I just wanted to kind of get a quick
Actually, Queen
feel for
Victoria's
people because,
birthday.
so we had this Rayshard Brooks thing come up, right after the Floyd deal, creating even more of a firestorm and everything like that. But I'm kind of curious for the panel here. How do you feel about what happened there in light of the fact that, the officer was fired, he's being charged, I guess the second officer is being charged. Is that fair? I mean, is that the right thing to do considering what we know? I mean, we learned a few things, but I mean, Rayshard Brooks was he's no angel, right?
Well, okay.
I mean-
neither was George Floyd, which is here nor there, but I have a lot to say on this topic, but I'll make it quick. These two things are very different. The only thing that people have getting so righteously rude about this is because of the close proximity to the timing of what happened with George Floyd. Here's the thing. This man was not innocent. He was not lying on the ground and being choked to death when he was clearly posing no threat. He took the taser from the cop and was posing a threat directly to the police. That's the major difference between this case and what happened with George Floyd. What happened with George Floyd should not have happened. He was not posing a threat. This man was posing a threat. And even if he wasn't, he was he was operating a vehicle while intoxicated, which in and of itself is illegal.
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of add on to that, it really does a disservice to George Floyd, who anyone who watched that video, at the risk of armchair quarterbacking for the prosecutors, that's kind of an open and shut case. There was no reason that level of force had to be used against that man, whereas the Rayshard Brooks thing is a lot more fuzzy, as most of these things are. And I want to kind of reference a conversation Mark and I had privately this week, where a lot of the reason cops get off in these sorts of cases is because overzealous prosecutors try to prove a political point by over prosecuting the case. So charging this officer with murder is probably not that's definitely not a sustainable charge, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but he was a very active threat was being posed to him in the moment where he killed that man. So I don't see how that could be murder. And at the risk of, should there even be a lesser charge, a whole nother conversation. I'm not qualified to answer that, but you're not going to get any charge if you try to charge him with something that's way over what the offense is.
And the people saying that a taser is not a lethal weapon obviously don't know that there are ways that a taser can very much be a lethal weapon.
The district attorney who charged the police officer, the former police officer in this case, literally said a week or two before, when going after police doing something, they were saying, well, under Georgia law, a taser is a deadly weapon. Like, he has a quote of him within the last few weeks saying it was a deadly weapon when he wanted to charge cops. But now that somebody was punching police officers and running away and firing weapons at them, he wants to charge this cop with murder. And I don't know if you guys saw how a lot of the Atlanta police officers called in sick, like had the blue flu.
They basically self-defunded themselves, basically.
And
And look at the mayor
so-
who is advocating for defunding the police. Now she's going to neighboring jurisdictions. Oh, please send the police over,
And
Yeah,
they
no,
said no.
The police recruitment was already a huge challenge, especially in these cities. This is only going to get exponentially worse over time with the messaging of all cops are evil and we should be spiking police officers' milkshakes and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Ryan, what we're going to get as a result of this, the worst of the worst are.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you guys probably don't remember the .com boom, but where anybody had reasonable tech skills got jobs. So if you went to a restaurant, you had.
You're saying this is going to lower the bar to be a cop? Absolutely, because
and we're going to have the worst.
they're not going to
to
defund the police because that's a crazy idea. So they're going to need to fill those spots somehow, and good people aren't going to want to go into that profession, or less good people are going to want to go into that profession when they're vilified on a daily basis and can't walk into a Shake Shack without having bleach allegedly put in their milkshake.
Well,
I don't know if you guys saw that case.
I like what Herschel Walker had to say about all this, which is for all the people calling to abolish the police, get rid of the police, he will pay to send them to a country that doesn't have police and see what they have to say about it.
So are the New Jersey Generals.
Yeah, no, I mean, what, and to your point too, I mean, what about the fact that we are seeing nationwide, we are seeing police officers resign. They're basically quitting. We are going to lose good people who've got the experience to handle a lot of these issues, and they're not going to be there. And that will leave us much more vulnerable to like these lesser qualified people getting in, going through the academy and getting on there. I mean, this could be a much bigger danger to our future, to the city's future down the line, with all of this going on there. And I don't think a lot of these politicians are really thinking this through very clearly at all, but big surprise in a blue city, right?
Well, it's not just that. It's the fact that there's national momentum behind this, and you've never seen a Democratic operative or a Democratic prosecutor turn down the opportunity to get in front of a camera and try to overcharge somebody. To the point Ryan was making earlier, the entire reason the officers in the Freddie Gray case up in Baltimore got off was because Marilyn Mosby overcharged them and she couldn't get it to stick. So this is going to continue to happen every time somebody gets overcharged. I think that the officer in Atlanta is not going to wind up being convicted of first-degree murder, that's for sure. If he's convicted of something, it's going to be one of the lesser charges. And even then, because the overcharging makes it look politically motivated, and it's probably going to be tried in Fulton County Jail. And Fulton County, Georgia, is much bigger than just Atlanta. Fulton County there's 6 million.
Yeah, that's
people
Alpharetta.
in
Basically,
there.
Fulton County is Montgomery County down there, pretty much.
Right, except the city of Atlanta isn't covered in that. So it's going to be a Fulton County jury that winds up hearing the case.
Yep.
But it's interesting. There's an interesting. I want to bring people's attention to a case here in Montgomery County, and it's basically an officer-involved shooting that took place 3 months ago, with a individual. It was a SWAT team went in at the wee hours of the morning. And there was an encounter, and we're with a he said, she said situation. So the police say he pulled a weapon, and the family says, no, he was asleep in bed. This is a fellow by the name of Duncan Lemp, and they were, the allegation is that he had weapons that he wasn't supposed to have because of a juvenile conviction, that he wasn't supposed to have weapons until he was 30. The problem is, the challenge is that none of this information has been made public yet. It's being investigated by the Howard County prosecutor. What's not been available is the juvenile arrest that says that he can't have a weapon. So the family says, no, that's not true. We don't know. Even more disturbing is after 3 months, we still don't have the video from this incident that would probably tell us a whole lot of, was he lying in bed with his girlfriend, or was he up trying to do something that was threatening to the officers? And what's remarkable is another officer-involved shooting in May in Montgomery County, and the video from that incident was released the very next day. So we've been waiting now for 3 months to find out. We don't even know who the officer is. We don't know any of the circumstances.
What makes the Duncan Lemp case different?
Arguably, it is because it was a guy with guns that the police were coming to take away. And I don't think that in Montgomery County that is as sympathetic a case as is some of the other incidents.
You know,
Well,
Mark,
I mean,
It all comes back to politics. Everything's politically motivated. What gets attention, what gets handled a certain way, is based on politics, nothing more. Particularly in Montgomery County.
yes.
Oh, Mark, you and I, we've experienced Montgomery County's justice system, so to speak. We had an individual that tried to break into Crab's Branch, and he got off on appeal. Where is our justice? Where do we go for our justice? People talk about justice.
Right.
We were
And let me be clear. I don't. This is an incident with a he said, she said. You have very diametrically opposed assertions about what happened. And it's being treated as though it's a personnel issue for just the police. And I think if there's anything we've learned from all these incidents is there is a very valid public policy interest for people outside the immediate circumstance to want to know what the hell happened.
Yep. And Mark, you wrote a great article. I forget, it's some news upstart blog or whatever it might be called. But this week about how sunshine is the best disinfectant for these sorts of things. And I think you're exactly right. Although I think in Montgomery County's case, there's a nefarious political motivation to it, but it's still one of the few good ideas that has come out of the recent dialogue nonetheless is a citizen review board of the police department, which in my opinion is any public agency that having additional citizen oversight is almost never a bad thing, as long as it's not politically motivated where it's stacked with people who hate the police and just want to
the irony of that, Ryan, is the fact that there actually are places in this country that not only have police citizen review boards, but they're elected citizen review boards, which is both good from the perspective of you have people who are not being appointed by the political establishment, but bad because it does exactly what you are concerned about, which is make the entire process political.
Yes, and there's an upside and a downside to it. But if if the appointment process is handled in the right way, and again, I don't have a lot of faith in our county council and county executive to do that and not just put activists who want to defund the police. But if they put reasonable, level-headed people, having that additional oversight where you can make issues like the one Mark is alluded to, if not public, at least to an outside independent third-party group of people to review it, I think that's a great thing for public accountability. And a big problem that's been exposed recently is, regardless of whether it's justified or not, people not trusting the police is a huge problem. So if you can restore that trust, that really helps everyone.
Now, in fairness, on this specific case, it is now being investigated by the Howard County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And so some of the responsibility rests with the fact that they've have not taken action one way or the other for the last 3 months. And I think that's a challenge. I mean, I think there's a strong public interest to want to be able to know what the facts were.
All right, Don.
One more thing before we move on, I just want to ask the group too, because there was talk here about the overcharging. Can we, or is there a way to get these prosecutors to quit overcharging, or is it so political that this is going to be it's ingrained and this is going to be something that's just going to continue on?
I mean, in counties that are heavily Democratic, it's going to be a race to see who can overcharge the most. There will be some prosecutor who comes along and says that these people were not charged with enough.
And it's to their own detriment. So
yeah. Well, the problem is we have this all really comes back to the toxic culture around like the cancel culture and free speech, and that the person who's brave enough, and the fact that you even have to be brave to say this is the epitomizes the problem, but it says this officer shouldn't be charged with first-degree murder or whatever it may be. That person is then labeled as defending the officer, as racist, as deserving of no future position, and mobs of people on Twitter are going to attempt to scold that person when really they're just contributing something productive to the dialogue, which doesn't happen enough today. And again, like Jackie said, it's to their own detriment, because if they would listen to those people and charge them with something that's actually reasonable, maybe the charges would stick.
At the risk of making an historical reference that Dwight likes to make,
yeah,
going back to the whole Rodney King and Los Angeles
the
riots,
great philosopher of our time.
Which was just a reminder: the last time federal troops were required to put down a civil disturbance, that was triggered by an incident where some police officers were charged. But what was the real spark was when those officers were found innocent up in Simi Valley, And I don't know that they were overcharged, but at least they were not convicted of the crimes they were charged with. And that is what then, touched off the huge Los Angeles riots. So there's a real risk in this, in that you end up creating a kind of back and forth situation that ends up just escalating a bad situation and making it far worse.
All right, another MoCo subject that we had briefly discussed, I guess, or bandied about in the pre-show, is this Montgomery County looking to rename streets that were named after Confederate war figures. Now, I think they've identified a couple, because it's like Jubal Early Street or whatever. I mean, rather than just the last name, it's the whole name. But what's going on here? What's wrong with this? Where is this going to go? In Montgomery County.
Confederates are traitors. We shouldn't have anything. They committed treason against the country. They can all go to hell, as far as I'm concerned.
But it is our history, Brian. Here's the thing: it is our history. Americans died on both sides of the Civil War.
The
I'm not defending
the bigger
slavery,
issue
I'm
in Montgomery County is
Confederacy.
not the Confederate naming as much, but I think the one that at least there's more instances of, and that I've heard a lot more about, is Richard Montgomery, the namesake of the county, name of one of the largest high schools. Founder of Montgomery County, had nothing to do with the Civil War. It was after his time, but he owned slaves, which, I mean, at the time, for someone in Maryland, in this part of Maryland, was a common thing. Unfortunately, that's part of it's a stain on our history, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Should we cancel every slave-owning person who was instrumental in the founding of this country and our municipalities?
There's a big difference between the immorality of slavery, which is obviously hugely immoral, and committing treason against the country.
For sure.
And like you said, if we're going to cancel everybody who did a bad thing, then nobody's going to be named for anything. Nobody's going to heaven. And, it's like, so Jesus died for our sins. Nobody said that anybody on this planet had.
And at the expense of being a hypocrite, because I accused Dwight of doing a slippery slope fallacy earlier, if you seed an inch, they'll take a mile, right?
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is a lot of the people advocating for this are saying, okay, we want to rename things that were named after Robert E. Lee, and George Washington is bad, and we just make that jump. And people saying that certain parts of, I don't know the specifics, but University of Virginia in Charlottesville, founded by Thomas Jefferson, certain things about their logo were allegedly bad, and things relating to Thomas Jefferson, who, again, founded America's first university and was one of the founding fathers of this country, also owned slaves. And I think with every person, you have the good with the bad. And I also think, I guess the moral of this story is, however bad their sins were, you can't it's not fair to judge people by today's historical figures by today's standards.
And the question I have to ask here is
when are we going to get rid of? Here's the thing: the left always seems to attack conservatives' heroes, but why is we not hearing anything about renaming the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, renaming Wilson High School,
or the 75 things in West Virginia that are named for Robert Byrd, who was alive in people's lifetime?
A member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes. This whole topic, what I want to know is what do we get out of this? Like, what is this going to accomplish? Don't we have way more productive things we could be doing that are actually continuing on in the right path of creating equality?
Are we still fighting a war on this pandemic we need to find a cure for? Isn't there also,
but not even that. But it's like there's like so many more productive ways that we can be working towards racial equality, and just changing the names of street signs is not really progressing that conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Jackie, I think you've got a good point here, because I mean, the left, they spend a lot of time talking about unifying, right? We want to build a bridge, we want to unify. But their actions are exactly the opposite. They do a lot of things to divide us. They bring these things up and they create divisions that are much sharper in that tone. And so we wind up growing further apart than actually closer together as a result.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead, Jackie.
Right. Yeah, like think of the amount of money that if we spend it on changing the names of streets and having to get all new signs, and if we put that money towards police education, any other of one of these dialogues that are actually taking action in the right direction, that money is being wasted on a street name. Think about that.
Yeah. I want to loop this back to something we talked about earlier, which was the Maryland flag. And what does the Maryland flag represent? It represents Reconstruction and coming together again as a country. That was the overarching goal of Reconstruction, was, yes, the Confederacy was treasonous against the United States and seceded from the country, but we're going to welcome them back in and unify as a country again and forgive the people who did that and let them back in. And I think that this is not me saying we should keep the Confederate monuments or streets or get rid of them. I think that's a bit of a more nuanced issue, but it is to the point of it going against that spirit of everyone who's ever done anything wrong is bad. And I think that just is emblematic of an attitude today that no one can be forgiven for anything, right?
And not that we should point out that the Democrats, by the way, fought to end Reconstruction.
Yes, absolutely. And not that we should forgive the Confederacy per se, but that we should be more accepting of one another and come at this from the same place. Part of the problem, or really the problem around these conversations right now, is the two sides are coming at it from completely different headspaces, where some people are trying to take a more nuanced view, and some people are saying that anyone who has any hesitation towards renaming anything at all is a racist bigot and needs to rot in hell. And there's two very different sides. You can't come to a consensus when you're arguing from two very different places like that. And that's the problem.
The problem, along the slippery slope argument, like we, a few years ago when we were talking about removal of Confederate monuments, I believe the president even brought up, where does this end? Are you going to be taking down Jefferson and Washington? And people were like, sort of laughing. Oh yeah, that's never going to happen. Come on, we're just talking about
look where we are
statues.
Now.
And so yesterday, that happened on in the West Coast, and they're looking to rename all the elementary schools that are named Jefferson or named after Washington. I believe the New York City Council just voted to remove I believe any statues of Jefferson or something. I mean, that's happening right now. I mean, the purge of history is happening, is starting to happen now. And it doesn't just we can say, I would maybe disagree with you a little bit, Brian. It's just, we don't need to go and put up new Confederate statues, obviously not, but we don't need to like rewrite all the history at this point. I feel like that's what's going on. And
I think there's a difference between rewriting history. I think there's a difference between rewriting history and honoring the history. And having the statues and seeing the flag and all this other stuff is doing a little bit too much of honoring it. Certainly, look back to World War II. We certainly do not forget the history of World War II. We've built museums to help study that history and to make sure that people don't forget that history. But you don't see a lot of statues of Nazis around either. You don't see a lot of statues in Russia of the communists around. I mean, there are ways to recognize that history, to remember that history, to talk logically and coherently about that history without having the monuments up. The biggest issue that I have with all of this, to that point, is that our friends on the left don't want to have a rational conversation about this. They don't want to have a coherent conversation about this. They just want to burn it all down, and that's part of the problem.
And I think that kind of connects to my point earlier about coming at this from different spaces. We're kind of running short on time here. I think we have one more topic before closing thoughts.
Yes.
What's next?
All right, so let's wrap this. We'll do this kind of as a whole schmear thing here. So cancel culture tour. We have Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, probably Mrs. Butterworth's, Cream of Wheat. I mean, where are we going with that? And then also let's talk about the COVID spikes. Apple's closing some stores in North Carolina, Florida, Arizona, I think maybe Texas, because of the spikes. Is that a little bit of an overreaction as we go also lead ourselves into the Trump rally in Tulsa and all the kind of what I see as a lot of hypocritical things going on there? So I'm going to throw really a bunch of things out at you there, but let's start really, at least briefly, with all these products that are now going to be renamed. Is there an end to this? What's next?
The company's made a decision. It's whatever. I mean, it's like, it's not like it's being mandated by the government. Companies decided to change the name of their products. Okay.
There's but yeah, there like same thing with the signs. There's bigger issues out there. It's not changing they're not changing the makeup of the actual product. It's still going to taste the same. I don't really care what's on the package.
Now, here's a more interesting question, I think, is do you think Aunt Jemima's sales will fall when people don't recognize the brand? A big part of their brand, and Uncle Ben's and Miss Butterworth's also, is people have the recognition. They see the label in the store and they go, oh, that's Aunt Jemima. It's a completely different brand. How do you get that?
Let me just put out there, Log Cabin maple syrup is much better than.
Log Cabin's not maple syrup, my friend, but okay.
It all sucks.
No. Yeah, it's all.
we're gonna get
You
into
got to get the stuff in the jug, like the pure or whatever.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's all. I was a marketing major. I work in marketing. It's all going to come down to how they market their new products.
Yeah.
At the end
See,
of the day,
Uncle
that's
Ben-
all.
Don't forget, there's
was
a
a
built-in
guy-
audience for the fact they changed it.
Right. I mean, Uncle Ben's was celebrating a grower of rice that was superior, and it's interesting that it's not being positioned that
Yeah,
way.
and
It's-
That one is more so the name. I've done research on these because I really was curious, like what's racist about that.
On the
But
same
it has
note,
to do with
I
the
mean,
name Uncle,
some people
because
would
that was people not wanting to dignify
Chef
a black
Boyardee
man
gonna
with
be
the
next?
word
Okay.
sir.
some people would argue that like Aunt Jemima isn't necessarily bad intention.
so the aunt and the uncle is the
Yeah.
trigger.
But the
The aunt isn't the trigger. It's for Aunt Jemima. It's actually the picture.
It's the
is
picture, and
the
they changed it
stereotype.
over the years. She used to
They
be
did,
wearing
yeah.
different attire, and then they changed it.
She used to have
Yeah, it
But
used to be a lot
Aunt
worse.
Jemima was a former slave who was then freed and hired by the company to basically be a spokesperson. And think of that what you will. I did read this week, which was interesting. Some of her descendants are upset. They thought that they viewed the label as honoring her aunt's honoring
So
their
Ben's-
ancestors' legacy.
So Ben's rice or Jemima's syrup
syrup.
would be
Yeah.
reflected transition.
Maybe
Okay.
they'll just call it like AJ's syrup and UB
I
rice.
I want to reference. I was talking about this before the show started. A Babylon Bee article, which for people who don't know what Babylon Bee is, it's essentially like The Onion. It's all farce.
It's better than
But
that.
they had a really, I think, poignant title to an article about all this, and honestly, I think it's totally where we're going. And it's activists fight racism by making sure pop culture depicts only white people. Let's not offend anybody, so let's get rid of any kind of diversity.
Yeah.
That
I mean, that's
it's
one way to think of
hilarious.
it.
It seems
He
counterintuitive.
says.
But anyway,
You don't
talk
sound
about-
convinced, right?
So
let's
is it-
talk about the
Yeah.
election.
Yeah, let's talk.
A
Well, yeah,
little
let's
bit.
talk. We can
Let's
talk
see,
about
like,
the election
before
and
we
the rally.
just are you going are you getting rid of Quaker Oats? Are you getting rid of
Yes.
Chef Boyardee?
We'll
Yeah.
see.
Like,
Chef
Would
Boyardee
you-
will be next. Mama Celeste is on the
I
chopping
think
block.
we're
She-
both
yeah.
of this and the naming issue. We're kind of heading towards a thing where the only way to avoid these issues entirely is just to not name things after people.
It's just gonna be called. Everything is gonna be like Aldi, like butter,
Yeah.
steak.
Oh, please. That is like the worst store in the
Hey,
universe.
don't talk
to go
bad
to.
about
Hey,
it.
Don't
I
talk
like
bad about
all-
Aldi.
We'll
Yeah.
talk offline, but actually, Aldi and Trader Joe's are owned by brothers. They were
Yeah.
brothers.
Same company,
Yeah.
right?
Dwight
Just
doesn't like
briefly.
Aldi
It's
because
a
he has to
long
put the
history.
quarter in
Okay,
the cart.
really
All right, we're
quickly,
gonna move
national
on
Vital
to the
is the
Trump
better
rally
press.
where Brian has stated emphatically he would not be caught dead. I guess at
It'll
a
be a
Trump rally.
cold day in hell before I go to that.
So there's going to be a rally. It's kind of an interesting thing, I guess. As I understand it, I mean, there's part of it is indoors, and then they're going to have so many people have requested tickets. They're going to do some outdoors. There's a lot of controversy going on there in terms of the social distancing. Is this safe? Is this going to create a spike in COVID-19 cases and things like that? Now, the spike in cases is not necessarily saying that we're going to get a lot of hospitalizations and or deaths, right? I mean, we've seen reopenings, cases have spiked, but not necessarily hospitalizations and deaths to the same degree. So it's not necessarily a bad thing in that regard. But, I mean, they got over 1 million requests for tickets
Yep.
for this thing.
Yep.
I think part of that shows that people need to get out. They want to get out, Trump or whatever. They just want to get
Are
out.
there
But
even a
Don-
million people in Oklahoma that are going to vote for
But
Trump?
Well,
Don-
that's the
has to
thing.
be in
In Tulsa,
Oklahoma.
there's 406,000 people.
Yeah.
They're all
But
traveling.
here's the thing. How is this rally, people gathering there, any different than the people that were out protesting last weekend, the weekend before last?
Well,
Right. Well, the arena has actually requested the written report from the Trump administration on how they're planning on incorporating social distancing.
the
and safety
campaign, I
guidelines.
assume you mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the
The
campaign.
campaign. Yeah.
I
There are
mean,
so many. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
oh, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say there are actually so many other fascinating things about this article. Why is the Trump campaign rallying in Oklahoma? You tend to only be rallying at this stage of a general election, and I know it's early in a general election, in states that you're concerned about winning. If the Trump campaign is concerned about winning Oklahoma, it's going to be a very long night for the Trump campaign on November 3rd.
I don't think
don't
it's
think
that,
it's
Brian.
about
I
finding
think
a place that's gonna let them.
But secondly, that could be too. That's the only people who'd let him do it. But secondly, is just the dumb nature of originally scheduling this rally for today on June 19th in Tulsa, which was the site of the Tulsa Massacre back in 1921, which was America's worst race riot, in which white people just wiped out a very wealthy section of Tulsa. It just killed Black Wall Street, as they called it at the time, and just decimated the African-American community in Tulsa for decades to come. It's just tone deaf to even be there to start with. Forget any of the stuff revolving COVID. The timing of it, the date of it, I don't know what's going on with the Trump campaign. And I'm saying this as an unbiased observer when I say this. I have my political science hat on right now. That was just a series of own goals by the Trump campaign at a time where the president and his campaign are already being accused of racial bias, whether it's fair or not.
I have to agree with you, Brian, and I am a supporter of President Trump and his reelection, especially looking at who his opponent is. But I think that there are a number of things. We didn't get a chance to talk about Supreme Court and everything, but I think there are a number of things on behalf of the Trump campaign that have been a little bit tone deaf. The other thing that we didn't get to mention, I think, also was Trump's decision on healthcare workers being able to deny treatment to LGBTQ people. I think that was something that really was not a smart move on his part. And I think those are the kinds of things that people are going to be looking at, especially in such a really tense time.
I think you've got a good point there in terms of if you're thinking about it from a political science viewpoint, it's like, why is Trump in Oklahoma? But I do think that part of it has to do with it's where they could schedule something, as well as the fact that right now, coming out of 90 some days or whatever of just really not being able to do much of anything, they're looking for something where they can have optically, except for the fact that they were tone deaf on the June 19th thing, they have this huge groundswell of people who want to be there. They're going to get a massive rally. It's going to look good in that sense, that way. But otherwise, other than that, I would fully expect that, they'll have to get into Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin in very short order. They can't wait too long for that.
Yeah. So we're
all three states of which have Democratic governors right now and have been more likely to have done thumbs down on doing a rally.
Yeah.
Right.
All right,
We're a little
it is
behind on time.
7:57.
We've got an extra person. Let's do final thoughts. Jackie, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I want to mention that, because we can get to in the show, that Amy Klobuchar decided to officially say that she's dropping out of the quote unquote Veep stakes because it should go to a woman of color. Don't know if she realized she really wasn't in the finalist list anyway. So she just wanted to get her name out there, I guess.
Especially after letting that cop off years before.
Yeah, I think she's just trying to stay relevant.
She's a woman of color. She's white. White's
I know.
Color.
She's hey,
she could be part Native American, like.
Yeah, I was gonna say Elizabeth Warren. Should we have a
she
Native
might
American?
actually have more Native American blood than Elizabeth Warren. That's the topic for next week.
But the other thing I wanted to say was Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there.
There we go.
That's
Don?
right. That's right. My turn?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I'll just make a quick comment about Oklahoma State University head coach Mike Gundy getting called on the carpet for a picture. Apparently, I guess he was on a fishing trip, and he happened to be wearing a One American News Network T-shirt, and it just went to hell. And he's apologized for this. He had one of his star running back, criticized him and all this stuff. I heard also that, I didn't look for the report. Somebody told me that the T-shirts apparently sold out as a result. Created a great groundswell where people.
Awesome.
We ought to be wearing one of those on the show one day or something like that, or I don't know. It's kind of funny because look, One American News is actually not watched by that many people to begin with. That whole thing probably did a lot of favor for One American News and their ratings, I think, in the end.
Look, we saw the same thing with Tucker Carlson.
Don reminds me of the old NET.
Yeah.
We saw the same thing with Tucker Carlson. People hated on Tucker Carlson. They said he was going too far, and he's had the highest ratings he's ever had this past week.
Yep. Mark?
So what we're saying is we've got to, as a show, Dr. Politics has got to go off the rails to the extreme, and then
don't give Dwight any ideas.
Yeah, right. This is This is the only reason that we allow Dwight on his own show is to allow is the prospect that will go off the rails to such an extent, and then Ryan and I will be in the position of going like that to Dwight and saying, "Calm down, Dwight."
See, now you've discovered how Red Maryland stayed on the air for 9 years.
Okay.
Marcus?
You're gonna potentially see flashpoints coming up if Democrat city DAs decide to overcharge police officers for defending themselves, and not just do a reasonable charge in cases where they've stepped over the line. You're going to see more police departments have the blue flu, and I even saw some talk about what happens on the 4th of July. And I think the New York City Police Union has talked about, well, maybe we should sit this one out.
All right. Dwight, we'll let you go. You only get one closing thought today because we're running late on time.
Oh, do we? Okay. My closing thought is I want to just point out today, the great state of Maryland, as we go to the beaches in Ocean City, there is one governor you can thank for that second span of the Bay Bridge.
No, mute. Hit the mute button. Hit the
He
mute
controls
button.
it this week. There's nothing we can do. Okay. Is that it, Dwight?
Ryan,
That is it, Governor
Okay,
Agnew. Thank you for the bridge.
We're gonna let Brian go now.
I didn't get all my stuff in earlier. The duckpin.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Duckpin. I have bad news for everybody. My real final thought this week is there are 3 teams now that have a coronavirus outbreak in their spring training camps in Florida. I'm not certain we're going to get baseball or any team sports this year.
Yep.
Orioles will
Sorry
be
to bear
undefeated,
the
though.
bad news.
One more thing about the Duckpin. You get to, Dwight doesn't. Are you guys going to be starting up podcasts at some point, or is that not on?
We are doing podcasts. We have some things in the works. I have all of the old Red Maryland equipment sitting here in a pile in my office floor, looking for it to assemble. We've got a couple of podcasts that are lined up. There'll be more information this summer. I think we're looking at possibly a Labor Day start for that.
Okay, sounds good. And then
Ryan, do you have one?
Yes, I do have one. So for the past few weeks, Marcus and I have kind of been opining during our final thoughts about how Joe Biden will not be the Democratic nominee. I have now reversed on that opinion. I do think that they're not they aren't making any moves that suggest they're going to pull something. I think they have the opinion, and I think they're wrong, but they think that if they can just keep him in the basement through November, that he'll win because people just don't like Trump that much. And I think there's a lot of people who don't like Trump, but they're not in states that are electorally important to this election. So I think that the Democrats don't understand the electorate. That's good for us. That's good for those of us on the call who want President Trump to win, and and let them make their own mistake.
Let me make it clear. I don't care who wins. We're screwed either way. That's
but to that point, the poll people are looking at the poll numbers. It means nothing because all the people who are really voting don't vote on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, it's objectively true. There is more. What was I going to say? There's more Romney Hillary voters than there are Obama Trump voters. I think that is true, but they're in less important states electorally.
And also,
and that's what the Democrats don't understand.
But here's the thing, Ryan. In 2016, the polls had Hillary so far ahead.
I understand that because they're national polls. There's more.
Let me remind you, though, the last 2 weeks of national polls had Hillary Clinton winning by about 2 points, which is exactly what she won by in the popular vote.
Yes.
So Here, my tip of the week: never look at a national poll. Look at the state polls.
Absolutely.
All right, with that, we do need to wrap. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next Friday.
Thank you,
check out the Duckpin.
Thanks for having me,
everyone.
everybody.